I'm here with the co-founder and CEO of Palantir, Dr. Alex Karp. Alex, thank you so much for being here with us.
I'm delighted to be here.
All right, so you're kicking off this inaugural summit today. You have a lot of U.S. leaders here in government and defense and other areas of the government. Right now today, with so much focus on AI and the potential of AI, what is Palantir's focus when it comes to its work with the U.S. government?
Well, there are two things we're working on. One is Palantir related, but arguably even more importantly, the U.S. Has every major provider of AI, which is in every other industrial revolution, you've had a just diversity of countries that have had the talent and the products. In this revolution, they're really all in America. So how do we get the US government to use innovation from providers? Very few of these providers work closely or closely enough with the US government. Now, in part, that's because many of these providers have had a somewhat timid view of helping the US government. The Silicon Valley motto has been, I get rich, you get nothing. And they've obviously often extended that to the US government. So my focus and our focus in DC is one, to basically embarrass other people in AI to work with the US government. It's like, we're doing very well here. You should also get involved. To talk to legislators, to explain to them that way too few of our dollars are being spent on AI. Palantir is one of, I think, the first company since the 50s that has produced government products that are in high demand commercially. So how do we get more companies that have commercially available products, meaning products that are proven on in a competitive environment into the US government? And how do we share knowledge? So that's the part that we're doing here. We have a lot of clients, many of which are sensitive, and they get to talk to each other here about what they're doing, what's worked and what's not.
All right, we'll talk more about your clients in just a bit. I do want to ask you, just a few days ago, you were in Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's AI meeting. It was a closed-door meeting. The press and the public not in the room, not allowed in the room. A lot of big-name tech leaders were there. We're talking Bill Gates, Sundar Pichai, Mark Zuckerberg. What was said there? Can you give us your takeaway? The headlines were it was all about regulating AI and government regulation. And also, I want to ask you, do you think the public should have been allowed in the room?
Well, so the overarching discussion was, how do you advance artificial intelligence, meaning how do we allow especially commercial enterprise in America to adopt AI, develop AI, and provide it to the US government and enterprise while simultaneously mitigating some of the obvious risks of AI, namely, one, we don't know where the road is going, and what happens if AI becomes generative AI becomes so powerful that, in fact, it's a risk to humankind. Okay, so that is a real issue, and there's a lot of consensus that we have to have some way of mitigating the risk. Then there are other discussions of, on the way there, how do you have artificial intelligence that has governance, guardrails, can prove that it's not discriminatory? And then there's the issue I'm passionate about is, given the risks, we also have to model as one of the greatest risks that our adversaries, namely Russia or China, develop tools that are vastly superior to ours and change the world order. I thought it was a very, very productive discussion. I guess it's an unpopular view that occasionally you have to begin discussions in private, but it is my view. And I'm sure at some point these discussions will be open and no legislation will happen. But in the end, we all have to come in there and say, this is what I really believe. It's already very hard to get people to show up and kind of go naked, but they're not going to go naked in public with public scrutiny. And there's a super heterogeneous group of people there, from union leaders to tech leaders. Among tech leaders, you have kind of more corporate-y people, then you have the freak show. So
you're referring to yourself, but self-deprecation understood.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you about one thing. We just showed some video of you sitting next to Elon Musk, and you said, how do you get to use AI in a way that doesn't hurt humanity? That's a question that he's been wrestling with. He's been talking about the dangers of AI. So were there in-depth discussions about how to use AI responsibly, as you mentioned, so it's not discriminatory, so it doesn't actually hurt humanity?
Yeah, though that's what we discussed, and there were
do you have details? Are there some details you can share?
Well, I mean, I can tell you what I said, which is I said, look, there are two camps. There's those that think AI is safe and those that think it's dangerous, and I'm in a third camp, which is it is dangerous, and if we don't actually work on it, our adversaries will, and we will lose all of our human rights. That was my position, and I think that it is what am I doing in DC? What am I doing every day, both as an individual and as the co-founder and leader of Palantir, is pushing America to adopt AI with governance responsibly in the commercial context, what does governance mean? Governance means you can look at the output of a large language model or the inputs into algorithms and say, is this something that protects our data, protects our health records, make sure they're not being used in a discriminatory way? And on the battlefield, is there some human supervision in the chain where we make lethal decisions? And where does that data come from? Who controls it? Who can ratchet this back? Who can ratchet this up? And do we have superiority that is so great that our adversaries are afraid to attack us? The standard for the US can't be parity because we're basically benevolent actors in the world, despite discrimination, certainly from the comparative perspective, maybe the only benevolent actors. And the best way to make sure that we have a safe world is to make sure that our adversaries know that our weapons are far superior to theirs. That's what I'm interested in. I
want to ask you more about the meeting. Did you have a chance to speak directly with Senate Majority Leader Schumer? And do we need an AI czar, Department of AI regulation, or something like that?
We are going to have regulation, and there's some forms of regulation I support. Like what the form of regulation I support is we must, the U.S. as leaders, control the risk to our civilization of out of control rogue AI. So we need, and it's both a combination, in my view, of regulation and people who can implement this, who are both technically and philosophically proficient. So it's a rare class of person because you're going to need to be able to, in an unbiased way, look at what someone is doing and report if there's a risk to our civilization. And then there's...
I want to ask you, so you don't think the public should be at the early stages of a conversation with this much magnitude?
You know, my job is to produce technology that transforms and puts America and its allies in a superior position, and to advocate for governance structures. And I am doing this in public and in private. And what I can tell you is I'm telling you exactly what I tell people in private, whether it's Senator Schumer or leaders of the world or my employees or people abroad, whoever I'm meeting, I am telling you the same thing. So you can be rest assured that you're hearing in public what I said in private. And what I say in public and in private is there's a real risk here, but the upside is that America will outperform all other Western countries because we produce the technology, we have legal structures that allow us to implement it, and we have the best talent, and we're the most innovative. On the military context, we are poised to win, but we have to make sure we actually win when we're poised to win. It's not the same thing. And that's what I'm saying in public and in private.
So Alex, we have a question for you from the New York Stock Exchange.
Alex, it's Sarah Eisen. It's great to hear this color and the philosophy behind how we think about AI and regulation. I'm curious, though, what it's going to mean for your business, because there has been a lot of enthusiasm and excitement in the market around Palantir as an AI play. What does growth look like from governments, from commercial, from international, as we adopt generative AI?
I think for us and for everyone, what you're going to see is radical growth in the U.S., slower growth in Europe. Growth in the U.S. because people are going to adopt the best, most robust, most useful technologies, and very quickly. What you're going to see in the market, and then I'll get to us, is you're going to see in the market, you've had a massive interest in AI. Many of these products deliver poetry and will allow me to write an essay maybe I know nothing about. The products that are going to do well in the sense that people are going to pay for them are going to have output differentials. So you're going to change the margins of a business. You're going to rebuild a supply chain. You're going to move a company from individual point-based company to a portfolio way of managing it. And those companies are going to succeed in the U.S. market. How are we doing? It's very early days, and you don't want to be out there being too optimistic, and we're being very careful to kind of move slower than we could, but we de facto cannot keep up with demand for our AIP product. We built these precursor technologies that are not understood yet, but the clients understand them because they are asking, how do I work with a large language model in a safe way, a government way, where I can make them more precise and change the underlying dynamics of my business within days. And what we've seen is in the last month, a 50% increase in people using our AIP product in a month. So, the other thing about...
Can I interrupt you, Alex, for 1 second? We have another question for you from the New York Stock Exchange. I want to get some of our anchor questions in as well.
Hey, Alex.
Yes,
Alex, it's David Faber. I just want to follow up on that. In terms of productivity and what's going to be available to the enterprise as a result of the adoption that you're talking about. One step down from threat to humanity, but what about threat to workers? Where are you in terms of how many jobs will be replaced as opposed to potentially simply aided to go work on higher end things?
This is a super important question. Typically technology is misaligned with the worker. And so there's obviously a lot of concern among working men and women that, radical increase in technological development will lead to a decrease in jobs and put pressure on their salaries. I think AI incorrectly implemented. So not long ago, we had 1% of the US hospital care market. Now we have 16%. What is going on with this radical increase? We're making doctors and nurses more effective. We're making factory workers more effective. By the way, one of the most important attributes of AI that's not been discovered yet and will be discovered is you can take manufacturing that maybe has been culturally specific to Japan or Korea. And we have one company that is a Japanese company producing a highly technical product in America, just like they produce it in Japan with American workers. And why can they do that? Because through enhanced software, algorithms, and AI, we can control the manufacturing environment for Americans as if it was Japan. That means American work. So then you get the agility, creativity, ingenuity of America with methodologies which we've not been able to produce here in the largest and most important market in the world. So I think, and this is a message that's going to take, we actually have to show rather than tell, because workers are going to be skeptical of it, but it's actually true.
We could keep this conversation going all day. Also today, you're announcing 2 new commercial customers in the private equity space. I know you said there's more demand for your products in the financial space as well. Dr. Alex Karp, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for talking to us. Hopefully you'll come back. We can talk more.
Oh, it's a huge pleasure.
All right, Alex, thank you.
Take care.
Back over to you guys. Thank you.
Frank, thanks. We'll be right back.
Interesting. So there was the Karp interview. I think that was 12-ish minutes, 13 minutes. I'll give a couple takeaways on how I felt about the interview, and then we'll keep going from there. So a couple of quotes from Karp. Number one, he said, when asked on AI growth, for us, you will see radical Palantir growth in the United States and slower growth internationally. He's pretty much said this the entire time for the past couple of months. The reason he's saying you're going to see US growth is because a lot of commercial customers, they're growing about 67% year over year in the United States. It was 30% last quarter. The reason for that is because you're seeing a ton of adoption from US companies that are accepting of AI, that are accepting of innovation. All the biggest AI improvements we've seen over the past couple of months have been from companies in the United States that have actually embraced it. So whether it's Cisco or CAS Investments, which is the deal they announced today, or BP or Cleveland Clinic or Tampa Bay General, there's so many different clients around the world, even Miller's Ale House, which is a restaurant company, that are trying to experiment with AI. And as a result of that, in the United States, you're going to see that radical growth is what he calls it. However, he says internationally, you're seeing slower growth. And I think he's correct about this because unfortunately, European companies and Asian companies, they're just not as quick to embrace AI. And until they're as quick to embrace that, they're definitely not going to be buying Palantir's AI solutions, which cost a hefty amount of money. And so as a result of that, you're probably going to see slower growth internationally. That doesn't mean the growth is not going to come. It just might be 12 to 18 months from now. It might not be 6 months from now, as people think. He also said, in quote, "We cannot keep up with the demand for our AIP product. We've seen 50% increase in usage of the product in a month. On August 7th, they had 100 customers using AIP. In September 14th, as per the latest AIP con, they have 150. So 50% increase month over month. When he says we cannot keep up with demand for our AIP product, I actually believe him. A couple months ago, I was a bit skeptical when he said we're getting 12 months of demand in 1 month, just because, you know, he's a CEO. He has to hype it up. He has to say that stuff. 150 customers, 50% month over month growth that are all integrated into a very thick product, now using it on a day-to-day basis and actually talking at your conference about why they're using it. It seems like he's correct on this idea that there is a lot of inbound demand. Does that turn into contracts, which eventually turn into revenue? That is the question. And we've got to see Palantir ultimately execute from that perspective. But it seems like the ball's in their court in order to execute. It's not really them having to go sell to the market why they need AIP. Almost every company, at least in the United States, is starting to recognize why they need something like an AIP and AI infrastructure to connect their LLMs to all their data, to make sense of all that stuff. The question just becomes, can Palantir capitalize on all of that stuff. I think this was a pretty basic interview by Karp. That last question about employee replacement, honestly, not the best question by the host. They could have asked something better. Karp has said many, many times what employee automation will look like. In fact, Karp, speaking of Stellantis and the United Auto Workers, Palantir was one of the only companies, Karp being one of the main factors of this, that did not want to replace workers at factories. And a couple of years ago, they implemented Foundry within Stellantis. That's one of Palantir's clients. And the workers that were interviewed at the factory said, yeah, we think this is a tool. We don't think this is replacing us. It's helping us be more data-driven in the factory to make better decisions around car parts and manufacturing versus us being replaced by, Excel spreadsheets on steroids doing our job. And so Palantir has always had the philosophy that if you get rid of people, you are going to collapse the very fabric of democracy, because you cannot have a healthy democracy unless you have a healthy economy and society. In order to do that, people need a purpose in their life, and a purpose comes from a job. At some level, you need to have something to do every day. And so Karp and team have been very, evil. They've been very even keen on this idea that you don't replace people, but rather you give people what they need to be able to do and the tools they need to be able to survive. So it makes sense that AIP is not going to lead to some rapid job deacceleration. It can happen, but I think Karp and Palantir don't really want to orient the product to make that happen. They want people to become more productive. Final thing I'll say is he spoke on the AI Summit at Washington, D.C. This is also where I think the host didn't really ask the best question, because the question was obsessed with why is this not happening in public? The reason it's not happening in public is because you've got the biggest, most important people in the world. They're not going to show that publicly yet. I mean, they're going to have to air out some dirty laundry and conversations and have back and forth in private. I think that's also the way, as Karp said, you get people to be naked. You get people to actually say what they're thinking on their mind, knowing that they don't have to worry about Wall Street Journal quoting every word that they say. And then after that, you have more discussions in the public. So what he said was that at the White House summit, where he was sitting with Elon Musk, he said the same thing that he's quite frankly been saying in public for a long time. China and Russia, our greatest adversaries, will find a way to make AI operational for them. If you don't believe in the adversarial and authoritarian values from that part of the world, then you have to utilize AI and operationalize it for democracy and for Western values. The inherent risk is that what if AI becomes too powerful and it kills humanity? And that is a risk. But the other risk is, what if other countries don't care about that risk? And because we care about the risk, we don't use AI, but they use AI. And not only does it kill humanity, in the process, you've got authoritarian regimes using AI to inevitably kill humanity. So there's a lot of nuance to this, but the number one thing I think we all can objectively agree on is that the United States should be a leader in AI, which for Karp means that the defense budget is going to be spending billions of more dollars on AI, which will obviously be good for Palantir and Palantir shareholders. But writ large, it will be good for the one competitive advantage, basically the moat that the United States has, which is software as our ability to out-innovate and truly outcompete every country in the world. Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, they have all come from the United States, and they've all come from the United States for a reason. There's a culture of innovation. When we see a trend, we chase that trend. We actually exploit that trend. We try to make that trend real for us. And AI seems like it's no different for Palantir's Alex Karp. And that's pretty much what Karp said today. And that's what we got. I think it was a decent interview. Nothing too crazy. Stock price right now on Palantir, 1420. So it was at 1372. Recovered a little bit from that 6 to 7% decline, now down about 3.9%. Not bad for Palantir, and S&P at 434 right now. It was a bloody day for the markets, recovering just a little bit, not as bloody as it was 30 minutes ago, but still obviously red today for Palantir.